Welcome back to the Gradually Well podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to join in and listen to this topic of discussion for today. I'm excited for it as always, but I will say that I was actually pretty nervous to record this episode, and I actually almost skipped recording this dimension because it's one of the dimensions of the 8 dimensions of wellness that I am most uncomfortable with and know that I have a lot of room for growth in it. So I was just having some nerves about talking about it with you. But I took the time to educate myself, listen to a few other conversations, like some very high pressure conversations, nothing super technical. And it actually really helped in making me feel more comfortable having the conversation or discussion with you here today. So with that said, today we're talking financial wellness. One of the conversations that I listened to was actually from another podcast. It's called the Balanced Black Girl podcast. And there was a guest. Her name is Bola. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, so I'll have it written in the show notes because I don't want to butcher it. But she was the guest there. She is a certified financial educator, and she just had so much wisdom and expertise in the area, but also was really good at making it feel like a normalized topic with identifying and recognizing people's real struggles and what all that finances mean to us as humans. So I will definitely have that episode linked in the show notes because it helped me out. So it may help you out as well if you're interested in listening to that. Another thing before we get started, I want to do a quick disclaimer that I am by no means a financial expert. So I will not be giving specific financial advice. This is more so talking about what financial wellness is and all that it entails. No financial advice, okay? So I don't want to mislead anyone, and I definitely don't want to cause any harm unintentionally. So that's my disclaimer on that. And lastly, this episode is going to be perfect for anyone who ever feels like overwhelmed about finances or just feels like finances is just such a big conversation. You kind of get stressed out about even the mentioning of it. If you ever feel like that, this is the episode for you because we're taking it easy. We're being casual. I have no specific financial advice for you, just maybe helping you get started and feeling comfortable with talking about it. So it's no pressure zone, okay? And then also, if you don't feel like that and you're just curious about my perspective on financial wellness or what exactly it is, you are definitely more than welcome. And anyone in between those two. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with what financial wellness is. I looked at a few different definitions of what financial wellness is, and I'll have to say that I feel like the one that resonates the most with me is the one that the certified financial educator on the Balanced Black Girl podcast, Bola was her name, she gave. Her definition was financial wellness is peace of mind. It's the ability to have options. It's your ability to walk away from situations that don't serve you. It's your ability to give back to your community. It's your ability to put your dollar towards what's important to you, right? Isn't that good? I like that definition because it really speaks to how deep finances affect our lives. Right? It's more than just being able to pay your bills or retire early, right? We sometimes hear those perspectives, but I like that definition, that description of it, because it really just speaks to the things, the unspokens about finances. It's our peace of mind. It's our ability to have access. It's our ability to, put our dollar towards things that matter to us, to you. And I really like that definition because when you say it like that, it really encompasses all of what financial wellness really is and takes your perspective further than it just being about paying your bills. And I like it also because it really speaks to how it can affect other areas of your life. But of course, if you've listened to at least even 2 episodes of this podcast, you are already familiar with me saying that each dimension of wellness has the ability to affect the other dimensions of wellness. So it's no surprise to us over here that one dimension can have a big impact on the other dimensions, be it your environment, your social wellness, any of the other 8. So you're really familiar with that. And if this is your first time listening to this podcast, you will hear me say that time and time again, that one dimension can definitely affect the other dimension. So Bola and I agree on that. But anyway, this also supports the perspective that, no, money can't buy happiness, but it can provide access and opportunity. So basically, that's just saying, let's not act like money can't make things happen that bring us happiness, basically, is what that perspective is saying. So all of us have a story, right, when it comes to finances and why we act the way that we act with our finances today. And I feel like a lot of our habits, just like with anything, is usually tied to our childhood and how we saw the adults in our lives handle their finances, specifically the adults in your home, whoever you grew up with. I feel like that has a lot to do with how you view finances. We, of course, hear with the people that grew up where their family just really struggled financially, and it was a huge stressor on the family. And so they grow up and they maybe make, a pact with themselves that they're not going to have that kind of lifestyle. They work really hard. They become very financially successful because they know what it's like to not have financial security. And so they worked really hard to have an extreme opposite of that, right? And then we've also heard of the people that have really never had to think about finances a day in their life because they have never had to go without. So those are kind of the extremes, but you also have people, of course, far and wide in between those two. For me, I definitely fall somewhere in between. I did not grow up seeing or really feeling any financial stress, but not to the extent where I was like oblivious to the impact and the weight of finances. So again, that's not to say that my family didn't have any financial stresses. I just think that my parents took the approach that they were going to be very intentional of surrounding conversations about money, and they didn't want my siblings and I to feel that stress or have to worry about that as kids. They didn't put that pressure on us. They didn't have deep financial conversations around us that would make us feel uncomfortable or stressed out about it. And I actually really thank them for that. So while I didn't grow up with this pressure to contribute to the household finances, they did teach us a good foundation. Like I remember my dad teaching us the basics of budgeting. And I even remember occasionally going to the bank and being able to put money in my checking or savings and being excited about that because it was just cool to see my balance go up. So I thought that was really cool. I also remember like if we were to go out to eat as a family and then the bill would come and my dad would say, okay, if I give the server this amount of money, what's my change going to be? And trying to calculate what the change was going to be before the survey came back, before they said anything, and also before my brother and sister. So I do remember little things like that. Did anyone else's parent used to do that? Ask them, okay, if I give them this, what is the change going to be? Random memory that I have. But that's kind of like the relationship that I had about money. My point is that as a kid, it really wasn't a stressful thing for me for the most part. It actually didn't become to be a little stressful until I started making my own. I had my first job working in fast food, and I think my first check was like for $100. Not a lot at all, but at 15, 16, in your first check, it feels like, oh, I'm balling. That's how it felt. And I did do what my dad had taught me. I think I gave like 10%, set aside 10% for savings, 10% for the church, and then other $80 was for me. And that still felt like a lot. I was like, budgeting ain't hard. Like you have so much left over to do what you want. So I know, young, naive Mariah. But, as they say, when you start making more money, your taste tends to get more expensive too. For example, all of a sudden, the more I worked, the more checks I got, I didn't want the snacks that we had at home that my mom had bought with the groceries. I needed to go get my own snacks from 7-Eleven or Walmart or whatever. Since I had it, it was no big deal. I never used to do that, of course, prior, and I was fine with that. But when you start having your own money, you start to splurge a little bit, and especially when I didn't know what I wanted to spend the rest on. I just didn't think about the spending. So as you can imagine, the more my checks grew, the more my taste for more expensive things grew as well. Fast forward to college, it was just more of the same. I still worked in the fast food industry, and I was definitely on a college student budget. Let me be clear about that. But in college, there's fun things. We go shopping, you go to different events, you want to look cute. So my money started shifting from just spending it on food to different events and clothes and stuff, $10, $15, $20, $30 here and there. That adds up real quick. And as I just continued that pattern, I slowly stopped doing the whole set aside a certain amount for savings and set aside a certain amount for church, and then the rest is yours, because my taste got more expensive in the things that I wanted to do. So suddenly that $80, it wasn't more just $80 anymore, but that $80 was no longer enough to meet the needs or the wants that I had. Suddenly, that $20 that I had put aside for savings in church, I all of a sudden really needed it. And when you explain it like that, it feels silly, and it's like, girl. But in the moment, it's just like, well, where did my money go? I need to have it. So slowly over time, I started giving less. I maybe just went down, okay, maybe not $10, $8, or whatever the 10% was of that check. That's just how I slowly stopped getting out of that habit of saving money. And then as I was finishing up college and eventually moved on to get my own apartment, of course, the adult bills started really rolling in for me. And that's when I really start to begin to feel stressed around finances. Even when I had my first full-time job, I was realizing that, oh my goodness, it's expensive to survive. I even took a Dave Ramsey college student course and tried to plan to pay off some debts and just save, and everything just felt completely overwhelming. It just felt like such a big feat that I had, and I was just already stressed about other things such as getting a job after college and what are you going to do with your life, that it just didn't seem pressing or didn't take priority for me to learn about all the different ways to save or invest. That was just something that I didn't feel like I had the brain space for. So I got to the point where I just became happy being able to pay my bills. If my bills were paid on time and I had enough to get groceries and maybe enjoy myself a little bit with some friends or just whatever, however I wanted to splurge a little bit, I became really content in that. And unfortunately, that led me to living paycheck to paycheck cycle. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially Americans, fall into that cycle of living check to check. And I think what's the scary part about being stuck in that living check to check cycle is that it doesn't always feel scary, right? I know that as an adult or a young adult, usually it can be easy to feel like you have the whole life ahead of you. You always have time, so much time to make money. And, when you grow up, it'll be easier. You feel like you have your whole life ahead of you. And in a way, you almost feel untouchable. And we sometimes take our health and our abilities and our time for granted. So we don't think about being better with our spending habits, even when money is tight, because we have this idea that we'll just be better once we make more, once we're not on a tight budget, is what a lot of people tend to think, or that's what I had been guilty of thinking sometimes too. And I do just want to have a side note here. I know that there are sometimes situations when people are just in really incredibly tight spots and there is no room to save. If we look at prices of things right now, the groceries have gone up in prices. We saw this past summer how gas went up like crazy. So I'm not talking about when there's things beyond our control. Jobs don't pay enough. We can go on and on about all the things that we can't control that really make it difficult to save money. I'm not talking about when we're in positions beyond our control. I'm talking about when we are able to pay our bills and we do have some leftover money and we choose not to be responsible with that. whether you're aware of it or not. Just you kind of are very unintentional. You may not be knowingly irresponsible. You just kind of are overwhelmed with it. And you're just like, if the bills are paid, whatever, knowing that there is room for growth. That is the specific situation that I'm talking about now, not when you're in a position that you can't control. Okay. But back to living check to check and it not being scary because it feels so normalized and we kind of are like, it is what it is, even though it doesn't have to be that way. It should really be something that we are uncomfortable with. I have let myself be comfortable with that because I just felt kind of defeated about my situation, that I'm just like, you know what? I'm happy to pay the bills. And it is a blessing to be able to pay your bills. It really is. It's great to be able to do that. And you work hard to do that. But that's not all the work that needs to be done. And sometimes I think that the idea that there's more work to be done, that just gets very daunting. And so we shut down and don't challenge ourselves to improve sometimes. We just think that the only solution is that it's going to get better when we make more money. And making more money does help a whole lot. Like, I can't act like it does not, okay? But sometimes it's not just you receiving more that's just going to automatically change your habits. It's going to make it easier to cover the current bills you have. But if you're like most people, the more money you make, your exposure, your taste for things, certain activities, certain experiences is going to grow to be more expensive. So you may find yourself in that same situation where you're like, where'd all my money go? I'm making so much more than I was then as a college student or college age student, but I'm still struggling with saving. It's because you never worked on your habits. So that's why we should be uncomfortable with this, even if we're not making the type of money that we know we will make one day or that we want to make one day, because at the end of the day, it comes down to our habits. You know, there's actually a statistic out there. It's varied throughout the years. I'm not exactly sure what it is right now, but I have seen a couple different sources say a few different numbers, anywhere from 40 to 60%. So I'm going to go in the middle and say 50% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. $400. We can't afford it. And $400 is not a lot of money, in a sense that like $400 can be spent so quick. Okay, that goes by so quick. I mean, anybody ever have car problems? Okay, there's your $400 easy. But also, it's a lot of money when you have to spend it unexpectedly. So it's not a lot of money and that it can be spent easily, but it is a lot of money when you don't have it. And to think that about half, anywhere from 40 to 60% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency is crazy. It's like, that just shows that the financial wellness is not good for a lot of people. And again, that could be for a lot of different reasons, systemic issues, personal issues. And sometimes it's really just that we don't have the brain space to learn more, learn to be better, because there's other priorities in our life that just take up more brain space. So I can't even begin to list all of the issues as to why about 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. But I want to put that statistic out there just so you know, if you are that person that couldn't afford a $400 emergency today, you're not alone. It's very common. It's unfortunate, but it's a very real, very common thing. Okay. So back to like my history with finances. Once I was living on my own, had more of my own bills, starting to really feel the stress of being an adult and having to pay for things. And I got to that point where I'm not excited, but just content with being able to pay my bills and live moderately comfortable. I just kind of settled with that. Being better at finances was always on my to-do list, that by the time I would look at it, the energy just was not there. It just wasn't. I'm like, listen, I gave all week with my work, with my school, with trying to not lose my mind. The last thing I want to do is read about investing or budgeting, you know? And ultimately, so while I did know that I needed to do better and there were things in my control, what I'm saying is that sense of urgency, it wasn't there for me. And I know a lot of people may feel that way. You may feel that way, like, oh, I know I need to do better. I know I need to learn. It's going to help me in the future. I'm going to be happy that I did. I know. And you just may be stuck in that place where the sense of urgency isn't there for a number of reasons. It could just feel like your other obligations or have to take priority. And sometimes They do. I can't even say that nothing is more important than money, because that's not true. Sometimes you do have other things that you have to address, right? I know I said I wasn't going to go down the list of things beyond our control to what makes it difficult to be good with money. But one thing I do want to mention is just the marketing. Marketing for consumerism. Marketing is so good. We have influencers, commercials, whatever. We're influenced to spend. So if our brain space is already being taken up with our work, with our families, with our health, with who else knows what else, if it's already being filled up with all these different things, and then we go to relax and we watch TV or we're scrolling on social media and every other thing is an ad, it's like built into your subconscious to spend money, or that you have this feeling that you need something. So it's crazy how much you have to be super aware of the things that you take in, because you can be subconsciously being influenced to spend money just because, just as like collateral damage to what's out there. You may not even be aware that that's happening, but it definitely is. And that's something kind of beyond your control. You can always limit how much TV or social media time that you take in, but it's in our conversations. It's in advertising everywhere. There's a limit. If you're an active person with engaging with regular conversation with people, you're going to get some of this exposure and feel this push to spend money. So unless you really do the work to avoid that mindset and have just really developed the discipline, you may have become a victim of it. I know I have suffered with that as well. And of course, once you fall into that whole spending mindset, it's really hard to break out of it, because for some people, spending money, it's that release of dopamine, that feel-good hormone in your brain. It's an escape from the stresses in our lives, that it just feels good to go get food or to buy something that we think is going to help us feel better. It's really hard to break that cycle of stopping spending so much. And sometimes it can become discouraging knowing that we have to improve in an area, but we don't really have the energy or feel like we have the brain space to learn a lot about it, but we also are feeling the effects of not being good at it. It can sometimes become very overwhelming and discouraging to even try. Because it's like, oh, I've tried time and time again. And, you could be that person that doesn't have a spending issue. It could legitimately be an income issue. And once it becomes an income issue, there's so many people that have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs. That takes up so much of your energy. I've worked 2 jobs at multiple points in my life, some of them requiring more energy than others. And when that isn't even enough, that is discouraging. Like, let's just be real. I could go get a 3rd job, but my goodness, So there's definitely reasons beyond our control that can contribute to financial stress. I'm not going to act like there's not, and I'm not going to act like it's just because we're lazy all the time that we're not good at finances. It's just that it can be hard. It can be a hard thing to get a grasp on when you have what feels like all these things against you. But I will say what has helped me in starting to turn this thing around for me and take my power back on the things that I can control is starting to acknowledge these things. Starting to not be afraid to say that there is an issue here and I'm overwhelmed with it. And because I know that life can get in the way of things and our plans get derailed, careers don't go the way that we wish and that we hoped and that we planned for them to go, jobs don't pay enough, I feel like I can tell you this because I really do get it. I've been through that. Starting with what you actually can control is going to help you. That may mean you have to address your money trauma. So let's talk about money trauma. One definition of it is it's a financial wound or injury that can cause disruptive behaviors with money, meaning something has happened that's made you act the way that you do with money. So you could be an excessive spender, or you can be a person that's actually scared to spend money. You can be an impulse spender. You can be an emotional spender. The list goes on. And I do want to clarify that to have money trauma, it doesn't have to be this one big dramatic event surrounding money that made you have some trauma around it. There's different levels of trauma and you can have it for various reasons. I'll just give an example to kind of help paint the picture clear. Say you stub your toe and you hit your toenail, right? and the toenails start to turn colors and it's still kind of tender. Days later, weeks later, you go to the doctor, you tell her what happened, that you stepped your toe and you really jacked up your nail. They take a look and they let you know your toenail is going to fall off, okay? The way you hit it, it was just right. It's going to continue to turn colors and you're going to lose the toenail. It's just going to fall off. They're going to document, or they're even going to tell you that there was trauma to the nail. And because of that, there's going to be the side effect of it turning colors and falling off. So while a toenail that's going to fall off is an example of trauma, it's not the same as a car accident per se. Car accident, we assume, oh yeah, there's trauma. There's all types of trauma associated with a car accident. Physical trauma, mental trauma, emotional trauma from that one big event. But there's also other things, other smaller events, such as jamming your toenail so hard that it's going to fall off. That's a smaller degree, but it is still trauma. So same thing with money. It doesn't have to be that your story was that you had absolutely no money, so you ended up homeless. And while that is a big event and that can definitely make you have trauma, it doesn't have to be that to have money trauma. So that's why I think that addressing your money trauma or maybe even recognizing it could be a really good starting point. And I want to specifically highlight this kind of trauma, the one that's the toenail and not the car accident, because it can be so easy to discount why things are hard for us and dismiss our experiences, right? When really we shouldn't be discounting or dismissing them, because it could be what's really playing a big role into why we act the way that we act right now. And I also want to say, this is not to say or try to convince you all that everybody has trauma surrounding money. Believe it or not, there are people that do not. But those of us that do have some financial trauma, no matter the degree, sometimes having trauma can make you feel paralyzed. You can identify that, yes, something bad happened. Yes, I need to improve. I know my life will be better if I improve. But we at the same time struggle with the amount of things that need to change in our life to make that improvement. So when we have that list of things that we know we have to do in order to make that improvement, while also thinking of the benefits, it gets to be too much. And it's like our brain goes through a traffic jam. And because there's a traffic jam, what happens when there's a traffic jam? You're paralyzed. You're stuck in one spot. You can't go to the left, right, front, back. You're stuck. So that's sometimes what happens when we have too much going on the mind. We get mentally paralyzed. And that's my theory on as to why people stay stuck in this check to check cycle, unless they're in one of those situations that it's beyond their control. But for people that there's more in their control than they're acknowledging, I think that's one of the reasons why we get stuck, because every time we try, by the time we get down to the bottom of our to-do list and see that whole nudge to do better financially, we just don't have the energy, and we have financial trauma that's not addressed, and we get a mental traffic jam. So if you are uncomfortable with where your financial wellness is, and you can again rate this, I've used this example before, where rate how much on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being super high and super valuable. On a scale of 1 to 10, how high do you value your financial wellness? And then once you have that number determined, ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with your financial wellness? So if those numbers aren't close, or the satisfaction number isn't where you would like it to be, and it makes you uncomfortable where it is, it may be time to challenge yourself and figure out, how do I get out of this paralyzed state? How do I actually find the time and change my habits with this? Now, this is the part that I am not qualified to give any kind of expert advice about this, but I also want to encourage you to know that it's okay to need the help. Just like with trying anything new, or if you have trauma surrounding this, you may need help to overcome it. Even if you don't have the trauma, sometimes with just starting something new. If I wanted to become a bodybuilder, I'd hire a trainer. If I had some physical trauma where I was in a car accident, I'd go to the doctor and I may have to do physical therapy. If I wanted to work on my health habits, I may hire a health and wellness coach. You see where I'm going with this? Whenever you're trying to do something new or whenever you're trying to work through something that's hard for you, you may reach out for professional help. So it may be time to check into seeing, hey, can I work with a financial advisor? Is there any kind of financial coaching assistance that is available to me that is not going to overwhelm me? So that may be what's the next step for you, looking into the type of help that you can get with this. And I know sometimes, like I said at the beginning, finances is something that a lot of people don't talk about. And so it may have not even occurred to you to get coaching or advising on your finances. And a lot of times that's just passed down perspectives like, oh, we don't talk about finances. Or that could have just been the dynamic in your household that you didn't talk about it. You just kind of did whatever and you just don't talk about it. You don't talk about it with strangers. And so you have just stopped talking about it with yourself. So I want to challenge you that maybe it is time to talk about it. It is time. If you want to see the improvement and if you need the help, it may be time to talk to somebody that is qualified and that has the right kind of support and education to help you if you are open and receptive to that. So wrapping it up here, I would just say to start with where you are. I'm not saying to start investing tomorrow at all, but one of the best ways to have a lasting behavior change with any goal is to take the time and laying a solid foundation. And what that means is addressing where you are, exploring that, really getting to the root of the issue and exploring that and really just working through those issues. So that's what I'm saying. I don't even have a technical recommendation because I don't know them. So basically this just means that to not jump ahead of yourself, because that's not going to lead to anything sustainable to you. And we're trying to prevent overwhelm. We're trying to prevent paralyzation with our money. Just don't leap into territories that you're not familiar with if you haven't even laid a good foundation in your financial wellness. Basically, what I'm saying is you don't want to jump so far ahead and you don't even know where your money is going right now. If you don't know how you spend your money on the regular, on your check to check, you probably shouldn't be looking into doing too much too soon. And again, some of us just need to start with articulating our desires to improve our financial wellness. That's a great start. Just starting to say that. And I'm not saying you have to announce it to anybody. You can start saying it to yourself, like say it out loud, write it down. I say, I want to improve my financial wellness. You may have never said that, and that could be a great starting point. Like when I'm talking about laying the foundation, like really brick by brick, okay? And I say that because there is power in speaking things. Too many of us are scared to talk about finances because we didn't talk about it growing up, or it's just sensitive for you. So as a way to cope, we just don't talk about it. And I get that. I do. And I've done that. I've not talked about it. I've ignored it and just kind of shut down with it and acted like it wasn't this issue for me. But that wasn't helping me, and that's not helping you. And it's not going to look and it's not going to feel easy when you do this. But talking about it, even just to yourself, is a really good place to start in improving your financial wellness. For me, I'm a researcher. And I like to hear examples and learn through hearing other people's stories. So if you want more of something that is just really not overwhelming and nothing super technical and just an easy way to enter the conversation, I do have a couple recommendations. There's a couple, I mentioned the podcasts that I listen to, but there's actually some shows that I watched as well. There's this documentary called Get Smart with Money. And I watched that and I thought it was really good. It helped me see other people's experiences, and just hearing their stories made me want to do better for myself. Seeing that it took them time and it wasn't just over a couple weeks of changing their lives because of their finances. That was really good for me to be able to see and hear. And it was just regular people. I mean, there was a varying degrees of types of people, but it was nice to see people that I identified with in some ways. So you could check that out. Again, that one's called Get Smart with Money, and that's on Netflix. Another one, this one is actually like a show series, and it's on PBS, and it's called Opportunity Knocks. I actually heard of this show because one of my favorite podcasters, Patrice Washington, she has a podcast called the Redefining Wealth podcast. She's actually one of the coaches on this show, but basically they took these different groups of families, couples, whatever, and they're assigned a coach, and they work with them one-on-one in rebuilding their finances. So I have not finished that show, but I've watched several episodes, and similar to the documentary, it really helped me to see different people, different walks of life, and how finances affected them. And it was just inspiring and motivating to me and to watch that. So you may watch those shows and see yourself in them, or you may hear something from the coaches that could be really beneficial to you. So I also recommend that. That one again is on PBS. And lastly, the certified financial educator that I mentioned earlier, Bola, that was interviewed on the Balanced Black Girl podcast. She has several books out, and her website also lists a bunch of things that she has done and programs and just resources. So I will link her website down in the show notes as well. So that's 3 different things that you can maybe take a look at if you just want to continue this discussion with normalizing some conversation about it without it being super technical or high pressure. Hopefully, I really hope this conversation didn't feel pressuring you to do anything, but just a little bit challenging. Before we close here, I do just want to share that definition again of financial wellness, because I think it's just so good, and I don't want us to leave here feeling overwhelmed again with that list in our mind of all the things that we need to do. And maybe this definition just kind of will give you some inspiration and just some clarity on seeing how deep finances touches our lives. So one more time for us, financial wellness is peace of mind. It's the ability to have options. It's your ability to walk away from situations that don't serve you. It's your ability to give back to your community or to walk away. It's your ability to put your dollar towards things that are important to you. I hope you feel better about financial wellness after listening to today's episode, and I hope you know that there is healing available for you no matter where you are financially if you are open to it. So with that said, we'll wrap up. Please rate this show and share it if you haven't done so already. If there is something that really stuck out to you, leave me a review over on Apple Podcast, or you can leave me a comment over on the YouTube channel. But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening and joining me today. Until next episode, bye.